back, guys, for another video. I want to thank you for tuning in. This article is going to be pretty lengthy. As you can tell from the description of the thumbnail, everything that glitter isn't gold, and we're going to get into the golden boy, the media's #1 pick, who they've been fawning over since he stepped on the scene and launched his campaign for presidency, Mayor Buttigieg, and the issues that's going down there in South Bend with the recent shooting of Eric Logan. Mayor Pete had come off the campaign trail to go back home to South Bend to address this situation that's taken place. As you can see by the recent videos in YouTube, the black community is upset and outraged at the long history of what has been taking place in the police department down there. Yes, there are still many police departments that are plagued with racist cops, and something has to be done about it. And I hope that they could get this situation resolved. I think he made some bad decisions, getting rid of the popular black police chief. You'll see the contradictory statements that he made, as far as saying that he asked the black chief to resign, but then when it came to one of these officers who had a history of racial incidents in his past, he didn't ask him to resign or leave, and then he stated a reason as to why. But he could call up the black police chief at the drop of a dime and ask for his resignation. That don't add up to me. But anyway, guys, I'm not going to take up too much time. Let's get into this article. Just want to warn you, it's pretty lengthy. But I hope that you bear with me and get through it with me, and I'll come back for final comments.
The golden boy is not so golden after all. What Mayor Pete couldn't fix about South Bend cops. Let's get into this article, guys. The fatal shooting that derailed Mayor Pete Buttigieg's campaign this week has a 7-year backstory. South Bend, Indiana. Mayor Pete emerged from his black Suburban outside the police department Friday night and stepped into the middle of the tensest moment of his nearly 8-year career as mayor. Protesters, angered by a police shooting 5 days earlier, pressed a list of 10 demands into his hands. On the list, would he support an independent investigation by the Justice Department? After quickly scanning the document, Buttigieg agreed, but there were 9 more issues and the crowd wasn't appeased. Can you say it to us today in front of all these cameras that Black Lives Matter? Did you just ask me if Black Lives Matter? The normally unflappable Buttigieg replied, anger in his voice. Yes, we want to hear you say it, another said. Of course Black Lives Matter, Buttigieg said into a microphone. You're running for president and you expect black people to vote for you? A black woman asked him. I'm not asking for your vote, Buttigieg said. You ain't gonna get it either, the woman shot back. This confrontation in his hometown was not where the 37-year-old mayor had expected to be on Friday night. Buttigieg's schedule had him in South Carolina at Rep. Jim Clyburn's world-famous fish fry. Recently, he had been riding a carpet of congratulatory headlines about his robust fundraising and his surging presidential campaign. He was on a glide path to center stage at next week's Democratic debates. But earlier last Sunday, that all changed when a white police officer in Buttigieg's South Bend Police Department, who had been accused of excessive force in the past, shot and killed a 54-year-old black man. Officials said the victim was rifling through parked cars and armed with a knife. The officer hadn't activated his body camera video, and the camera on his dash wasn't switched on either. So there was no independent record of the fatal encounter. Buttigieg left the campaign trail to deal with fallout from an encounter that almost instantly was swept into the fraught national debate over how police treat minorities in their communities. Over the course of the week, under the gaze of a horde of national media, Buttigieg struggled to reclaim control of the narrative that he has nurtured during his surprising candidacy. The thoughtful, compassionate technocrat whose smart policies have reinvigorated his once beleaguered Rust Belt city. On Thursday, a black pastor interviewing Buttigieg on a radio show noted pointedly that Buttigieg was running two campaigns. One is for the presidency of the United States of America, and the other is damage control after a Father's Day shooting of Mr. Eric Logan. A day later, Logan's grieving mother screamed at him during the march, "I'm tired of hearing your lies." The shooting has exposed a lingering and bitter conflict between South Bend's black community and a predominantly white police department, a department that has grown only whiter since Buttigieg became mayor in 2012. As mayor, Buttigieg, who has pledged transparency and professionalism, sometimes seemed to make matters worse. 3 months into his first term, he forced out the city's first black police chief, who had been accused of illegally recording his officers, some of whom were said to have made racist remarks. Since then, there have been a number of controversies with racial overtones, violent confrontations between police and minority residents, and lawsuits by black officers alleging that Buttigieg's hand-picked police chiefs engaged in racially discriminatory behavior. The officers involved in the shooting and its aftermath each have been accused multiple times of using excessive force against black people. On Friday, the lawyer for the victim's family specifically targeted Buttigieg in an interview, saying the shooting was a byproduct of the Buttigieg administration's acceptance of police misconduct. The criticism comes at a particularly sensitive time on his campaign, after having been dodged by concerns that he wasn't a viable candidate among black voters, scoring as low as 2% in some polls. He had begun to make some progress. When word of the shooting arrived, Buttigieg had just finished a trip to South Carolina, where he campaigned on his so-called Douglas Plan, a policy proposal aimed at fostering black entrepreneurship and lowering incarceration rates. A Post and Courier Change research poll last week showed him surging into third place behind Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, a gain of 6% among black voters there. Buttigieg, the presidential candidate, has caught fire, in part due to his knack for connecting local and national issues, but the shooting this week dredged up a kind of history that could tie them together in the most damaging way. On Wednesday morning, after 2 days of private meetings with community members, Buttigieg emerged to make his first public remarks since Sunday's late-night news conference. He went to a local board of public safety swearing-in ceremony to address 6 new police officers and their parents. "As you know, you are also joining this police department at a very challenging moment here in South Bend," he told them. "We gather in the wake of a shooting that has left family members grieving the loss of someone they love, and leaves an officer and his family dealing with the consequences of a lethal encounter." Buttigieg acknowledged that relationships between city leaders and police and community members had frayed. The mayor expressed frustration that the officer hadn't activated his body camera, part of a $1.5 million technology investment a year ago, when it mattered most. The mayor had also instituted implicit bias training for his police force and created a website where citizens can review documents related to complaints against police. This, he said, is just one reminder of how much work is yet to be done. How far we will have to go before the day when no community member or officer would hesitate to trust one another's word, and ultimately, how far we have to go before we live in a society where none of the circumstances leading to Sunday morning's death could have happened in the first place. After his speech, Buttigieg fielded media questions that focused on how he was handling the response. Why hadn't he attended a vigil for the victim at the scene of the shooting Monday evening? I took some advice from community leaders on this and reached the decision that it would be more of a distraction if I were to attend. Buttigieg faced what seemed to be a no-win situation. Attend the vigil and be accused of co-opting it for the sake of his presidential campaign, or not attend and be criticized for callousness. What about the optics of appearing publicly with police first instead of in a community or with victims? I'm not really concerned about optics so much as making sure that the community is headed in the right direction. On Thursday, Buttigieg took to a local radio station, WUBS, where he was asked a question by a black pastor, the Reverend Sylvester William Jr., that seemed to strike closer to the heart of Buttigieg's record on racial issues. Why he was asked, are all 6 of the new officers he had just sworn in white? Buttigieg responded with an apology. We need people of color on the police department, Buttigieg said, and I have failed to get us a more diverse police department. But that uniformly white array of new cadets wasn't an aberration under Buttigieg's administration. In 2014, during his first term in office, black officers made up more than 10% of the 253-person department. By last year, that figure had dwindled to 5%. Contrary to its national image as a white, working-class, Roman Catholic town, South Bend is 40% non-white, 26% black, and 14% Hispanic, and yet its police force each year under Buttigieg has looked a little less like the city itself. While South Bend's police department problems began long before Buttigieg arrived in office, a decision he made early in his administration set him back. In March 2012, 3 months into his term, Buttigieg asked for the resignation of popular police chief Darrell Boykins, the city's first black chief. He had learned that Boykins illegally recorded members of the force whom he believed had used racist language, and that Boykins was under investigation by the FBI for it. Buttigieg phoned Boykins and asked him to resign. Buttigieg has said that call was a mistake, and that since then he has conducted all personnel changes in person. I sat at the end of the conference table in my office and contemplated which scenario was more likely to tear the community apart. A well-liked African-American police chief potentially being indicted over compliance with a very technical federal law, or me removing him for allowing things to reach this point. Buttigieg writes in his memoir, Shortest Way Home, there was no good option. The community would erupt either way. Buttigieg's prediction was right. The backlash was fierce, and the storyline virtually swallowed his first year in office. This issue, previously an abstraction for me, was now hitting home. Buttigieg writes in his memoir, Ferguson and everything that followed in the Black Lives Matter movement came after the tapes controversy exploded locally, but their urgency grew from the same root. The fact that many of the worst historical injustices visited upon black citizens of our country came at the hands of local law enforcement. Like an original sin, this basic fact burdens every police officer, no matter how good, in every neighborhood of color, no matter how safe, to this day. The now infamous tapes case has earned Buttigieg tough media coverage nationally since he entered the crowded presidential race, but it was only one of a series of race-related policing controversies he has faced in office, all of which contributed to the raw emotions that emerged in the wake of the shooting. The names of the 2 officers involved in the shooting Sunday were already familiar to many of the city's black and Hispanic residents and activists. According to court documents, Ryan O'Neal, the officer who fired the fatal shot, had been named in 2 lawsuits related to racially motivated misconduct. In 2008, several years before Buttigieg took office, a man named Derek Burton claimed that O'Neal called him a stupid nigger and tased me unconscious. In another 2008 lawsuit against multiple officers, Michael Alexander accused O'Neill of leveling multiple blows to my head and my back. Alexander alleged that the officers had used a stun gun on him and that he heard them laughing about how I was flopping like a fish. Both cases, which were filed while in custody by the men themselves and without legal help, were dismissed by judges. Isn't that often the case? In July 2008, South Bend Police Lieutenant David A. Newton wrote in an internal affairs report, which Politico has viewed, that O'Neill should be removed as a field training officer because of other racist remarks he made. Looking at black women, O'Neill allegedly asked a fellow officer, "Do you want to get some of that black meat?" O'Neill told the officer that he had dated black women in high school, but when they later saw a black man walking with a white woman, O'Neill remarked to his fellow officer, "Man, I hate seeing that. It makes me sick." The incident was investigated by an African American member of the police department. A spokesperson for the South Bend Police Department told Politico that the document was one person's testimony on an internal affairs investigation. The assertions presented were determined to be not sustained at the conclusion of the investigation, because they could label that as hearsay. No other witnesses, just his word and the officer. You know how those cases go. The June 16th incident also involved a second officer, Aaron Nepper, who drove the wounded man, Eric Logan, to the hospital in a squad car. He had called for an ambulance but decided not to wait. According to the account he gave officials, Logan, who was shot once in the abdomen, died later. Nepper also had a history. In 2016, he was the subject of public protests that called for his dismissal because of a series of incidents over the years. Scott Ruskowski, Buttigieg police chief, pulled Nepper off the streets, citing threats to the officer. 4 months later, Nepper was back on the beat. In August 2012, Nepper was one of three officers who tricked a mentally disabled 7-Eleven clerk into eating a spoonful of cinnamon in 60 seconds. The man became violently ill. His family sued. The city offered a settlement before trial of $15,000, but the family declined it and the jury awarded $8,000. Wow. Obviously, I'm not pleased, Buttigieg said at the time. That year, Nepper and other officers entered a black family's home in the middle of the night and punched 17-year-old Deshaun Franklin 6 times and stunned him with a taser. The officers had mistaken him for someone else. A federal jury decided that Nepper and his fellow officers violated Franklin's constitutional rights, but awarded him and his family $18. Can you believe that? $18. More public outrage ensued. Buttigieg was pressured to fire Nepper, but he said that by state statute, only the city's Board of Public Safety had that authority. Isn't that strange? But he could ask the police chief, the black police chief, to resign at the drop of a dime. Obviously, a firing level personnel decision is made by the Board of Public Safety, he said in 2016, but just to be clear, I accept responsibility for appointments to the Board of Public Safety and police chief. In the interest of promoting equity, Buttigieg has appointed 3 African Americans to the 4-member Board of Public Safety. 1 seat is vacant. At a board meeting in September 2016, protesters interrupted a panel on which Buttigieg sat with Ruskowski, the former head of the local police union, who became police chief in 2015. I don't think this can be resolved by targeting any individual, Buttigieg said. It can only be resolved by making sure we have a higher level of trust in the community that's borne out by consistently positive behavior and consistently fair discipline. Today, Buttigieg is on his 3rd police chief. After dismissing Boykins, Buttigieg hired Ron Teachman, a white native of Bedford, Massachusetts. Police officers claim Teachman had run amok, while Buttigieg, a Navy Reserve officer, was on leave from his mayoral duties to serve a 9-month tour in Afghanistan. A local activist accused Teachman of using racist imagery in a sermon, according to a local media report. Davin Hackett, a military veteran with expertise in explosives, filed a lawsuit against Teachman for racial discrimination when he was denied a position on the bomb squad. Later, he claimed in a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Commission that he was passed over for promotion to sergeant in favor of a less qualified white candidate. In retaliation, Hackett says he was subjected to unjustified investigations and discipline. According to local news reports, 2 other black officers filed race discrimination suits within the same year. Asked on Wednesday by reporters what he had learned from tensions erupting over race-related policing issues, Buttigieg nodded to his early lack of deftness handling a complex subject that has ended the careers of other mayors. When I first took office almost 8 years ago, I may have had a theoretical understanding of what's at stake in issues of race and racism in policing. But it's different when you bear responsibility for a police department and for the well-being of a community. I've learned about how raw these issues are. By midweek, it seemed like Buttigieg had been speaking nonstop since he arrived 3 days earlier, talking publicly and privately, making sweeping statements about the long tail of racial injustice and issuing specific orders about the use of body cameras. He had met privately with Logan's family and publicly pledged the city's support for them in his commitment to a thorough investigation of the shooting. How thorough can it be with no other eyewitnesses, no body camera, no dash cam? That's going to be interesting how they're going to come up with an opposing view from what the officer is saying. On the night of the shooting, he talked openly about how his response was shaped by past mistakes. We've had prior cases of use of force incidents and officers involved shootings where I hesitated, frankly, to get in front of cameras because we didn't know very much and it was out of our hands. Buttigieg spent hours on the phone with local leaders. We don't want to have to wait for final word from the different investigations to be taking next steps here to fortify community relationships, to keep channels of communication open, and to determine what we can do going forward that will be positive. He don't want another Ferguson riot breaking out in his town. That's what's going on with all this talking and meeting behind closed doors, trying to keep this little spark from turning into a full-blown fire. And he sought advice from people he called experts from around the country. One of them was the Reverend Al Sharpton. Oh Lord, the worst person you could call. The longtime New York activist who has been at the center of numerous racial controversies over the decades. Sharpton shared the advice he gave Buttigieg with MSNBC's Chuck Todd. I told him, you got to be very honest, you got to be transparent, and this family wants justice. But Sharpton also made it clear that history, especially involving race and policing, is difficult to shake. I think the fact that he had a problem with the black police chief in the past, this brings all of this back. Buttigieg was not without support from some local leaders. He's been methodical about addressing what's happened since Sunday. Apostle Michael Patton, Apostle, is that what they call him these days? President of the local NAACP chapter told me. And one of his staunchest critics, City Councilor Regina Williams Preston, who lost her primary bid to replace Buttigieg in May, even applauded his decision to step away from the campaign. I think that was the right thing to do, to come back and help us through this tragedy. On Thursday evening, Buttigieg blasted a lengthy email to supporters about his crisis back home. Eric's death, he wrote, no matter What details emerge about the circumstances and the actions of the officers involved shines a bright light on a subject that impacts my life, your life, and the lives of Americans from all walks of life. All police work and all of American life takes place in the shadow of racism, which hurts everyone and everything it touches. Through it all, there was the sense that despite all that Buttigieg had said, he still was not making headway with some of his most aggrieved constituents, and that being the black community and the long history of what has been going on in South Bend. Well, guys, this was a pretty lengthy article. I thank you for bearing with me, getting through all of this material. But we're gonna see what's gonna happen with the rest of Buttigieg campaign. You know, if this damage control is gonna be effective or not. But I'm pretty sure after this, his campaign is probably gonna be on a decline. But we'll just keep our eyes peeled to see what happens. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.
As you can see from that article, they have some work to do down there in South Bend, and I hope that they can correct the issues that's going on down there within that police department, within that community, and hopefully they can get on the right track. It seems like people want to work together to resolve the issues, so hopefully they'll be able to do that. But on a sadder note, I want to report on something I spoke about a couple of weeks ago with Israel Folau, the rugby player in Australia that was booted off the team for making certain tweets on social media. Matter of fact, he was banned from playing from any league over there. So this is the sad part. He couldn't afford really to fight this litigation, so he started a GoFundMe page with PayPal, and he raised about a little over $700,000. Do you know that PayPal shut down his GoFundMe? Do you know why? Because they side with the LGBTQ LMNOP community, which is sad. So like I was stating in the last video, with this cryptocurrency and the mark of the beast, you can already see how Christians are going to be squeezed out of transactions, you know, being able to buy and sell. Because if you don't go along with a certain agenda, you're going to be blocked from participating. And this is a prime example of what I was trying to get across in that video, Mark of the Beast, with the Facebook new cryptocurrency, the Libra. As I stated before, they have already been putting conservative voices in timeout, closing their Facebook accounts. And you just heard what they did to Candace Owens. And I think only because she's popular is the only reason why they reinstated her Facebook page, because she was blocked off of YouTube as well. But we're going to keep our eyes peeled on this. And like I stated before, I believe that we are going to witness the soon return of Jesus in our lifetime. I mean, things are ripe and things are shaping up as far as the prophecies in Revelation. I don't know if you study prophecy. I don't know if you're a believer. If you're not, I hope that you really consider your final destination and the soon return of Jesus Christ, and how you're going to stand when he appears. Because there's going to be two reactions: the lost reaction and the saints reaction. If I were you, I would want to be in that saint camp and not in the lost camp, because as Hebrews chapter 12 verse 29 states, the Lord is a consuming fire, and sin cannot abide in his presence. So when he comes, it's going to be a dual effect. Those who have been waiting for him and who are his, who have been baptized and who have been looking for his soon return, are going to get caught up and meet him in the air. And those who are living their best life and having the time of their life in this sinful world, they're gonna burn up at his appearing. Well, guys, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.